some church sign humor to me. I don't think Linda's here today, but I thought I'd share. Oh, good. And I thought these were right down my alley anyway. I thought they were really funny, so I thought I'd share them with you. It's just sort of humor on church signs, they have out in front and often have inspirational messages on them. This is one from St. Mark's Anglican Church. The sign said, Adam and Eve, the first people to not read the Apple terms and conditions. It's kind of updated signs, I think. Holy Trinity, Roman Catholic Church. Too hot to keep changing sign. Sin bad, Jesus good, details inside. I like that one. Here's one, I guess it must have been in the winter at Knox Presbyterian Church on a winter day. If you were praying for snow, please stop.
Yeah.
Like that. Clays Mill Baptist Church. Whoever stole our AC units, keep one. It's hot where you're going. Edge to that. Wesley Chapel, United Methodist Church. Be the kind of person your pet thinks you are. That's true. Stonebridge Church of God. Honk if you love Jesus. Text while driving if you want to meet him. Walnut Grove Baptist Church. Just love everyone. I'll sort them out later. God. That's a good policy. Central Baptist Church. Forgive your enemies. It messes with their heads. United Church in University Place. Tweet others as you would like to be tweeted. That's cute. And the last one, some anonymous church on a busy highway. Jesus is watching, but the police have radar. Useful tip from that church. Thank you for sharing. That's good. Well, last week I was sharing some ideas about that wonderful parable about the pearl of great price, and it's about our priorities, putting God first, our God connection, cultivating that first, and sort of being willing to take inventory day by day, being willing to eliminate things that are out of alignment with that kind of conflict with our relationship with God the Good, and being a channel of that. So I kind of wanted to keep going on that idea a little bit more about how to put that into action every day with the choices we make, our motivations for doing things and the kind of choices we make. I think this was sparked by an interview I saw. I've seen the interview a couple of times now because I found it so interesting, between a writer by the name of Mitch Albom, who wrote a very well-known book called Tuesdays with Maury. How many of you read that in the years gone? A lot of us. Read it years ago. Apparently this is its 20th anniversary of its publication. So it's been around a long time. It's sold something like 15 million copies. But it started out as a tiny little thing, a tiny little book that he had difficulty getting any publisher interested in. And he didn't write it for any kind of fame or fortune. He wrote it just to help Professor Maury Schwartz, his old sociology professor from Brandeis, to help with his medical expenses because he had ALS and was going to be going soon from that. And he wanted to help him and his family with those costs associated with that. So they met once a week on Tuesdays for 16, 20 weeks, something like that, and took up a different topic each week. And Mitch kind of didn't even tell Maury about it, decided to write a little book up of that and try to get it published to help. So he was talking about that with I think it was an Oprah interview, and his motivation for doing that and where it came from, and Maury's motivation in his last year of life to spend an afternoon a week sharing wisdom with a former student who he hadn't seen in 15 years. Both such generous acts when you think about it. So he was asked to sum up what he learned from that experience, and he said, "I realized how one voice and something done for the right reasons can change the world. How one voice and something done for the right reasons can change the world." That's that phrase that really caught my attention, the right reasons. What are the right reasons? For Maury and Mitch, those Tuesday afternoons, they were both doing something for the right reason. So it suggests something that we're doing for not just our personal needs, not just to get some personal satisfaction, but for a higher purpose. They were doing something for a somewhat higher purpose. So that's kind of what the right reasons are all about, I think, when we do something from that level. And the power of that, Mitch is saying, it's tremendous, the power that can ripple out from something done for the right reasons. It made me think of a mystical idea I've always loved, ever since I heard about it some years back. It's out of the Kabbalah, Jewish mystical teachings. Some of you might have heard about it. The Hebrew phrase for it is tikkun olam, which I'm probably pronouncing badly. Tikkun olam means to heal the world, heal or repair the world. And it comes out of mystical Jewish teachings. It's from the Kabbalah. It's a very old idea. But basically, Jewish mystics talk about the brokenness of the world, and that there are scattered pieces of divinity everywhere, hidden in the world. And by doing good things, things for the right reasons, we raise holy sparks, and we get these shattered bits of divinity to raise up again and join together as one, into the one. It's a beautiful idea. But in this way, the world is healed. The world is repaired. The brokenness is reunited into oneness. And it's something, clearly, that we can all participate in ourselves, and how we act with one another, and how we treat each other, how we treat the world. We can act in ways that bring those scattered bits of divinity into wholeness again, and we can help heal the world, tikkun olam. They called it raising holy sparks. Raising holy sparks. That's a powerful idea, I think. And I think that's kind of what Mitch Albom was talking about. That's things done for the right reasons have this healing influence. They raise up the good, and they have a lot more healing influence than we realize. We hear this idea, of course, throughout spiritual traditions. It's certainly a strong idea in Christianity. It's taught again and again that we have a deep need somehow to participate in the healing of the world, to share whatever we've been given with the world, to contribute to that healing, to that goodness, to the spread of that. Jesus said, freely you have received, we have all received gifts. Freely you have received, freely give. Certainly in Buddhism, Buddha said, make of yourself a light. Make of yourself a light. And Jesus, of course, said, let your light shine before others, because it gives glory to God. It lifts up the good. I like this really clear lesson from Emily Cady. This is in her text, God, a Present Help. She said, if we repress the God-given loving impulse to distribute freely what we receive, if we turn the current in the opposite direction by seeking what we can get from the world instead of what we can give to it, then we so choke up the living stream of good that God himself is powerless to pour into us the very things for which we pray. That's a really powerful teaching, I think. If we repress the God-giving love and impulse, one of the things she's saying there, I think, is that it's God-given, it's our nature. It's our nature to give out whatever we have to give. Whatever we have to give. And there's a lot of things, I think, in contemporary life that make that more challenging for us. A lot of things, the distractions of contemporary life, the absorption, the self-absorption. We get more isolated in many ways with our technologies and our phones and so on, more separate from one another, more distracted by the constant busyness and activity and noise. There's definitely a challenge with a sense of overwhelm we get nowadays, don't you think? There's so many calls for so many needs, so many fronts on which help is needed. People talk of compassion fatigue. People don't know what to do, so we try not to look. And then that shuts us off to this flow Emily Cady is talking about, participating in some way, keeping our gifts flowing out into the world is something, it's a deep impulse. So we're a little bit at odds. It's a challenge sometimes. Joan Chittister, another favorite writer of mine, she said the quintessential sin of developed nations of the world is the sin of disregard. It resonates a little bit with me, and I think there are reasons for it because people don't know what to do. And there can be a sense of being kind of stymied and the natural flow of our desire to help and extend ourselves and share what we have can get a little blocked sometimes. It's not that we don't want to pay attention, we just don't know how, and it feels like too much sometimes. Have you ever felt that? I think it's a very common feeling in our lives these days. But something done for the right reasons comes from someplace deep inside. What does that look like in our lives? How would we describe that? What's that impulse like? I think of it as something that it kind of arises from self, but it's not limited to self. It arises from self. It's self-expressing. It's an impulse that's self-expressing and self-fulfilling, but it's not limited to meeting only personal needs. It goes beyond that. It comes from a deeper place. Eckhart Tolle talks about a distinction between what he calls the egoic self, which is always trying to get its needs met, and what he calls the deep I, deeper level of self. And I think that's a good way of describing that level of self from which these divine impulses to do something, to share something, to give something back come from. That's the level, the deep I level of self, to give of oneself from that level. I think that's what Mitch Albom is talking about, is the right reasons, and how that can make so much happen when it comes from that deeper level of self. We often feel like we don't have much to give, but in fact we all do have a great deal to give, and it really isn't about possessions or money or assets in that sense. One of Mitch and Professor Schwartz's weekly lessons was about giving and service, and Maury asked Mitch, who was a 37-year-old sports writer at the time, worked for ESPN and things like that, and Maury's dying of ALS. Maury asked Mitch, how do you give? How do you give back into the world, into the community? What's your service? How do you give? And Mitch said, I write checks. I understand that, and of course checks are needed, money is needed. But Maury said, anybody can write checks though. And you've been given special gifts. You have been given the gift of your voice. You have a voice that you could be using in the world in such powerful ways. And he said, you're meant to use that for more than self-aggrandizement. It's something that comes from a deeper place and can contribute in a much broader and bigger way. And Mitch realized this was true. He had a voice. He had a regular sports column. He worked for ESPN. He had a publisher. He was recognized, all around the world by people in sports. People would hail him in airports and say, "Who's going to win the Super Bowl?" And he'd say, "Patriots," and on he'd go. But he was kind of recognized everywhere. But that's what he was using his voice for. That was about it. And somehow in this experience with Maury, he began to realize, as Maury said, giving is living. There's a way in which I can use my voice for something more than this. Something more than building a bank account or a reputation. Something that can do some good in the world. Something that gets, helps raise up some holy sparks out there. So I think, like Mitch, wise people realize this and are doing it all the time. Realizing that getting personal needs met isn't enough for a life. Would you agree? We see it around us all the time, thank God. People realizing it isn't just about getting my bills paid and a little bit more than that. It's about contributing in some way that means something. I may not even see all the effects of it or the blessings of it, but we need that deep sense of it contributes to the good in some way. Mitch Albom's life changed in this regard completely as a result of that experience. These weekly meetings with his old professor, the little book he wrote as a result of it, he began to feel very strongly a desire to give back in any way he could. He and his wife didn't have children of their own, and they were very touched by the need of children in Haiti, and they have an orphanage there. And he's been running that for decades now, a couple decades anyway. He started it shortly after the book came out. And they have a number of children there and more children living at that orphanage every year. He visits monthly, goes to Haiti to visit the children who are in that orphanage in Haiti. And he had a unique situation come up with one of the children there, a little girl who had some kind of brain cancer, some kind of tumor. And they brought her to the States for a surgery they hoped would save her life. It did not, and she did die of the cancer, but they adopted her and cared for her the rest of her short life here. That must have been something that came from the deep I level, the desire to do that. Certainly not something that would be easy to do or convenient for them or their family. Must have been deeply painful, and yet he talks about it as one of the richest experiences of love he's ever had in his life. And the ripple effects of giving in that way, how far that spreads, you just really can't you can't define, you can't even see it. You know, people with very little money are finding ways to give back all the time in all of our lives. In this very room, we could do an assessment of what everyone is doing for, not personal need reasons so much as something else. There's some deeper fulfillment we're looking for in our feeling and impulse to put out there. I know people doing all kinds of work like that. I know some wonderful people sharing their wisdom, like Professor Mori, for instance, that they've gained in life through their own experiences. I'm thinking of some lovely licensed Unity teachers I call on fairly often to guest speak and who share teachings around this community. They're not doing it for the money. Which is true of so many people who are sharing their gifts through whatever avenues arise for them, sharing wonderful wisdom that they have gained for the blessing of doing it, for the sense of it contributes in some way. It raises up a holy spark or two. I know people who just spend time listening to someone, reading to someone. I did that for a number of years as a hospice volunteer, just visiting someone in their home and reading to somebody from their favorite book or their favorite poet. I know people who tutor children for the school over the summers or tutor them after school. People who cook for someone or drop off meals on wheels. In this very room, there are people who do this kind of work. People who make music for people in nursing homes who love music and can't get out to hear it anymore. People who play bugles or bagpipes at graveside services for whoever wants that kind of service. There are people who do all kinds of loving service in the world. And why do they do it? For the right reasons, I think. For reasons that come from a deeper level than self-aggrandizement, as Maury put it. For reasons deeper than getting our personal needs met. And yet it is a personal need, because it comes from a deep level. It comes from that deep I level of needing to do something that's going to contribute to the good in some way. And the great good news about that is that it has a lot more influence than we think. That mystical teaching from the Kabbalah about how it raises holy sparks and brings up all these scattered pieces of divinity to unite them again in the world, to heal the world, repair the world. I think that's a statement of truth. That's how it works, I think. As everyone freely gives, as they have freely received, and we let our gifts flow through us in whatever ways we have, whether it's with our voices or our hands or our meals or our feet, or our, whatever our efforts are, our gifts are that we get out into the world. As we do that, we contribute to the healing of the world day by day, moment by moment, and every gesture has a lot more influence than we think. The ripples keep going. When you think about that little book that Mitch Albom wrote 20 years ago, and the 15 million copies that were sold, and all the people that read those books, and all the people that shared ideas they read in the book, like I'm doing right now, the tremendous influence of something done for the right reason. And that could be anything. That could be somebody you listen to, you spend time listening to, somebody you pay attention to, somebody you share a little bit of wisdom with, somebody you do a little service for, or you sing a song to, cook a meal for, or whatever it is. the ripple effects of that can go so much farther than we think. And holy sparks get raised that do heal the world. So here's my affirmation for the day. That it's kind of like an intention and a statement, a place I want to be in, and as I freely give, as I freely receive, I raise holy sparks. Would you like to join me in that one?
Sure.
I raise holy sparks. Let's take that in a prayer for a moment and affirm that truth within. We find ways, moment by moment, day by day. God guides us in it. These divine impulses from within. We discover them, and we find ways to channel our gifts into the world, to use the gifts we've been given in ways that are a blessing not only to ourselves but to others. And as we do that each day, as we are alert to that each day, letting God guide us in what's ours to do, and what's ours to give, we find we are raising up holy sparks. We are lifting up healing energy in the world and connecting ourselves with one another and with God more and more each day. We are healing the world. We are grateful to be channels of the living energy of God. So it is. Amen.